I've just constantly, since I heard that Mike passed, Brother Ben called me and told me. He passed approximately 10 o'clock Friday morning. I think about how, toward the latter part of his life, he found the truth. And when he found it, he did what preachers like me for a lifetime have encouraged people to do. When you see, when you know, go. Don't just sit there and mull it over year after year and piddly think this and piddly think that. Life is too dang short. When you see it and you know it, go for it. And Mike did. And he stuck it out. He supported the church. He supported people. He supported the preachers. And I can't help but think that a few minutes after the angels delivered Mike, when they walked up to him, leading Mike in their hands, the Lord was standing there with a smile on his face, and he looked at him and smiled and said, "Well, Mike, you finally got that right." I'm going to preach this morning, God willing, on a subject that's heavily intellectual as opposed to emotional for obvious reasons. I don't think an emotional content sermon is anything I need to go around today, not only in the interest of me being able to finish the sermon, but in you being able to get much out of it under the circumstances. You do not lose a friend and a church member like Mike Birmingham and easily get over it. There's emptiness. Years from now, we'll be sitting here, and then it'll occur to us, Mike ain't saying you got that right. So we'll concentrate on things that require the mind to get as far away from the heart as possible. I want to talk to you on the subject of biblical cosmology. Cosmology is a word that it breaks down to cosmos and logos. Logos, of course, means the Word, and in Greek, one of Jesus' personal names as God is Hologos, the Word. There are three words for word in Greek that are primary: logos, rhema, and graphe. From graphe, we get the word graphics, and that, of course, would mean the written word. Rhema means the spoken word. And then logos is the word that also we recognize as the base word for logic or rational thinking systematically. The word logos means the idea, the concept, or in a simpler form, if you will, the definition. That's what the logos means, the idea. You're trying to speak with the rhema and scribble with the graphe. And of course, God gives us words written down to help us visualize and realize and perceive the living word that he actually and really is. So you can think of the Bible as the word of the word in the word. The written word that was spoken by the living word who lives. The word of the word in the word. So that's what we're going to mess with this morning, is cosmology. Cosmos is a Greek word that means basically the universe, all that is, all that exists. So cosmology would mean the study or the learning about the universe, about them things shining in the night out there. Biblical cosmology, of course, would be rationalizing, perfecting, and understanding precisely what God reveals to us about the world of things out there, not only on this planet, but out among the stars. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend our time dealing with three false cosmologies. Three false cosmologies. I'll just list them off here. Don't worry about it if you don't know what some of the words means, particularly you younger church members. I'll get to that. When we take each one of these three up, I will define it very clearly and then beat it to death with a stick. All right. We're going to deal with the quasi-biblical flat earth. Then we're going to deal with the theistic geocentricity cosmology. Geo meaning earth, centricity meaning centered. So there is a theistic, a God-oriented, earth-centered cosmology. And then we're going to deal with the atheistic heliocentricity. Heliocentricity means sun-centered, and of course you know what atheist means. It means a fool. God has said, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. That's what God said in Psalms 14. And God has given his opinion about that. So we'll deal with these three false cosmologies. Each one of these theories, interestingly enough, is partly true. It's partly true. But they're also partly false. The true part is the icing on the cake to get you to bite into the wormy flour. Therefore, all of these cosmologies are what we can call half-truths. Half-truths. Now, the part-truths are all based on Scripture or scriptural inference. So, even the parts that sometimes you'll find atheistic scientists talking about, they'll laugh and admit in the joke, well, it even says so in the Bible, like that means something. So, truth, biblical heliocentricity, which is what I'll cover in the last couple of minutes of the sermon, and by the time I get there, having refuted everything else, it won't need much explanation. You'll see it right off the bat. True biblical heliocentricity involves all of the truths contained in each half-truth with none of the lies. Now, that leads us to a very interesting terminal question on this point. Where do the false parts come from? The false parts all come from Satan, the father of lies. And his purpose is to contradict Scripture in every way he can, to discredit the Word of God. Now, with that understanding, let's lay cosmology on the table for a little bit, and let's look at Satan, the father of lies, because there's some important things we need to know about Satan, who originated all this dum-dum doo-doo, and it will help us understand why he did it. Then when we set out to deal with it, you'll understand exactly what we're headed for, and when I peel it apart and show it to you, you'll nod your heads and understand where it came from. Now, you folks in the very back, do me a favor. Say back there and back there. If I drop off, I think I've got this thing cranked enough, but if I drop off and you can't hear me, please don't hesitate to wave, and I'll get Brother Jim or get Dave, get Henry to run all the way back up here and fix things for me, or we'll get something done. So you're going to have to put up with me. I can put up with you. So let's just get along with it. All right, let's look at Satan, the father of lies. And that's the first point about Satan this morning. He is indeed the father or origin of all lies. Jesus Christ says in John 8:44-45. John 8:44-45. Jesus talking to the scribes and Pharisees, and he says, "You're of your father the devil." That's where I get a lot of my tact from. I study Jesus Christ, and I try to follow his good manners and so forth. People look at some of the books I write, and they say, "Why do you write like that? It's so mean." Because a lot of my books are written what's called, classically speaking, apologetic. Apologetic does not mean to apologize. Apologia in Greek means to defend, as in a court. So when I write those books, I'm laying out the truth, I'm proving the church, and then I'm defending it. Sometimes with gorilla fingers up people's noses, and sometimes with a stick upside the head. Somebody says, why do you act like that? Men of God are supposed to be sweet and loving and gentle. Well, go tell that to Nehemiah. Nehemiah said when he was trying to get them to rebuild the wall and all, they wouldn't pay attention to him. And I'm paraphrasing it. He said he had to slap them upside the head, cuss at them, make them swear by God. So that's my authority for a man of God, sometimes using those tactics. You find butt-dumb Christians are just outright enemies of the truth who bear every evidence of being unregenerate, and there's only one way to deal with them. You punch them in the nose. So, there we go. But Jesus Christ says very tactfully, "You're of your father the devil," talking to the scribes and Pharisees, "and the lust of your father ye will do." He was a murderer from the beginning, killed that's not good. Killed Adam and Eve in the garden, and abode not in the truth. He knew what the truth was, all that truth that God had told the angels and then the human race at the very beginning, and he chose not to accept it and stay in it. And then he says, "For he is a liar and the father of it." The mind in all of the universe that originated lying and deceiving was Satan. And that is his golden tool that he's used ever since. You're going to see why in just a minute. "And because I tell you the truth," Jesus says to the scribes and Pharisees, "you believe me not." Look at that. Because I tell you the truth, you believe me not. You know, one of the things that amazes me looking back on 53 years of ministering the Word of God to people, there are a bunch of people out there that absolutely, bitterly hate me. There's another bunch of people out there that, unless they're just tricking me right and left, they seem to like me. They'll come up to me and say, "I love you, Brother Jarrell, I appreciate you," and they'll want to hug my neck. But let me tell you something that's really weird. Do you know that the people that hate me the most and the people that love me the most hate me and love me for exactly the same reason? What I preach to them out of the Bible. And lo and behold, here God manifest in the flesh is standing before one of the most cunning tribes of Satan's disciples. And he says, "Because I tell you the truth, ye believe me not." So this is the kind of being we're dealing with. This is the mind that's dreamed up all of this cosmology stuff we're going to be playing with this morning. Now, Jesus said there's no truth in him. Let's look into that a little bit deeper. Turn over to Ezekiel 28, verse 18. "I'll tell you ahead of time, then I'll prove it." The reason there's no truth in him is Satan is an insane schizophrenic. Somebody says, "You know what you're talking about?" I think I do. Now, I only have a minor in psychology, but I do have a minor. I've also got 50-something years experience in dealing with all kinds of people from the pulpit and from the living room, in debates and in teaching. I've had the pleasure of pastoring medical doctors who were trained in psychiatric methodology. Been able to sit down and discuss with them. They recommend me a book to get, and I go get the book and read it and study it. So I know a little bit about insane people and a little bit about crazy people. One of the most fascinating movies I've ever watched is Criminal Minds, and the reason I love it so much is I like the personalities of the people, but it's the topic matter, criminal minds. And they're dealing with the really broken-headed psychos that run loose out there till you catch them. Why are they broken? What does it do? So I understand. I've got about 7 books by FBI agents and profilers. One of the ladies has a doctor's degree in psychology. And I sit there and I read about criminal psychology and different types of criminals, what the marks and characteristics are, all against a background base from university of a minor in psychology, talk with medical doctors that are trained in these topics. I think I know a little bit. Now, I'm like old Bull. Remember Bull in the TV movie? He says, I'm an ignoramus, but I'm not a moron. And that's my motto. I'm an ignoramus, I'll admit that, but I'm not a moron. So when I tell you about some of these things, I know a little bit about them. I'm not just blowing off steam, to use big words. Satan is an insane schizophrenic. Let's turn to Ezekiel 28:18. Here's the proof text. Thou, and God's talking to the covering cherub, who happens to be Satan, and he's identified in verses 12 through 15. But we're only going to look at verse 18. Thou hast defiled thy sanctuaries by the multitude of thine iniquities. By the iniquity of thy traffic, all the business you've ever engaged in has been iniquitous. Therefore, now here it is, watch it closely. Therefore will I bring forth a fire from the midst of thee, it shall devour thee. And I will bring thee to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all them that behold thee. That's going to be an end time demonstration. That'll be one of the cartoon clips of end time. Everybody saved and damned will be able to see what's happening to Satan and the fallen angels. And it'll be the last entertainment the damned ever have, and one of the sweetest that the saved will ever enjoy. Trust me. Wait till you actually see that being and his cohorts cast screaming into a lake of fire. But now let's go back to that point, I will bring forth a fire from the midst of thee. I want to talk briefly about delusions and illusions. Illusions are tricks one person plays on another. A delusion is a trick a person plays on themselves. Look it up in the dictionary, verified. I'm going to take no more time with it. But God says in Thessalonians, talking about doing conflict with evil people, that I will send them a strong delusion that did not receive the love of the truth that they might be saved, that they all might be damned. And he's talking about, in that same context, the working of Satan. So you see a delusion, and God sending a delusion means that when a person sins against God, then they go astray on their own imagining. And the way God sends a delusion to lead them into damnation is, okay, now you understood me. You saw what I said. You rejected me. You rejected my words. Here's the stick I'm going to hit you up the head with. I'm going to let you believe a lie, and then I'm going to send you to hell for it. Now that's pretty rough, but that's the way it goes. That's the way it works. Herbal tea. Let's hope it works. Now, when we look at that Hebrew word midst, it's the Hebrew word in Strong's. It's the Hebrew concordance number 8432. You might want to note that down. I'm going to give somebody this outline. It'll be on the net. You can get it later. But if you want to run home and double check, that's it. Number 8432, Tabek. Sounds like something Spock would say, doesn't it? Tabek. From an unused root meaning to sever or cut. A bisection, that means cut in half. That is, by implication, the center. Now let's think a minute. When we're talking about rational beings, i.e., humans and angels, what is the one characteristic that separates and sets apart all rational beings from every other living thing, like intelligent chimpanzees, cunning foxes, hungry ants, sweet blowing willow trees in the summer wind, pretty flowers on the hillside. What makes us different from those things? Reason. A thinking, rational mind. That's the midst of a rational being. And God says, I will bring forth a fire from the midst of thee, from thy rational mind, which is the center of thy being. And it means, the word he chose to use, tabek, means the severed midst, the divided midst, the bisected midst, a midst cut in two. Now let's look at that interesting word, schizophrenia. It comes from the Greek word phren, P-H-R-E-N, English spelling, which means the mind. And then you have schizein, another Greek word. Schizein, that means to split. So therefore, what does schizophrenia mean? It means a split mind. Do you see the direct, unmistakable connection? I'll bring forth a fire from the split middle of you, and it shall devour you. Now, before I make any more comments, let's see what schizophrenia involves. Not just a split mind, but because the mind is split and severed in the midst, it can't do certain things. Let's see what it can't do. A long-term mental disorder of a type, and now this comes from the Oxford American Dictionary, so it's something everybody can read. Oxford American is what Apple uses as its online dictionary. They licensed an American version of the Oxford, which is one of the best dictionaries in the world in English. A long-term mental disorder of a type involving a breakdown in the relation between thought, emotion, and behavior. Notice that. Thought's your spirit. Emotion, that's the soul. And behavior, that involves the body. See, all three body parts are involved. Spirit, soul, and body, the three components of all rational beings. A breakdown in the relation between the thought, emotion, and behavior, leading to faulty perception. You see something, and as the old Negro spiritual down south used to say, it ain't necessarily so. That's a good song. You ought to go back and learn that song and listen to all the stanzas. Boy, they talk about a lot of stuff that ain't necessarily so. Leading to faulty perception, inappropriate actions, and feelings. Withdrawal from reality. See, because you can't accurately perceive reality, the schizophrenic can't, he withdraws from reality and he clings over here to something he thinks is more real than what he's seeing. He kind of sort of makes up an alternate reality. But he withdraws from reality. And remember what reality is? It's the real world of objects and processes that you can touch and feel and handle with your five physical senses. Or as one of the simplest philosophical definitions is, reality is the way things actually are. And so a schizophrenic withdraws from the way things actually are because he's so broken in his head, he can't see the way they actually are. And personal relationships, those make him uncomfortable. Why? Because he does not correctly know how to relate to other people. He doesn't know what real love is because he's capable of loving only himself. He's a narcissist. He can't forgive other people because he considers himself the most important, and therefore anybody that harms him in any way is an enemy. He has no concept of forgiveness. And a sense of fantasy and delusion. Whoa. And what does God send to people that withdraw themselves from him? Strong delusion that they might be damned, who receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. Do you see where we're getting here? And a sense of mental fragmentation. You just can't seem to get it all together. Now, let me read it to you without comment so you can get the big picture. Schizophrenia, a long-term mental disorder of a type involving breakdown in the relation between thought, emotion, and behavior, leading to faulty perception, inappropriate actions, and feelings. Withdrawal from reality and personal relationships into fantasy, delusion, and a sense of mental fragmentation. Therefore I will bring forth a fire from the severed midst of you, which is your rational mind, Satan, and it will devour thee, and I'll bring thee to ashes upon the earth. That's the gentleman we're dealing with. He is an insane schizophrenic. Now, as a result of that, we now know why why Jesus Christ said that Satan is the father of lies. Because in the light of everything we just looked at, observe this. Because he's unable to accurately perceive reality, because he's schizoid, thus unable to tell the truth, which is, of course, a representation of the way things actually are, then we find that the problem we're dealing with is the closest he can come is to tell a lie. Now, what's a lie? A lie has two interesting facets. Used with reference to a situation involving deception, a liar is something told to deceive other people. But, forgive me, a lie is also founded on a mistaken impression. It can be an honest mistake. It can be a completely something you overlooked. But if you're telling it as the truth, it ain't, so it's a lie. And this is the way it's defined, not only in the dictionaries, but it's defined that way in medical terminology also, when you did to somebody's a chronic liar. Let me repeat that. Used with reference to a situation involving deception or founded on a mistaken impression. Now, if Satan is deluded, if he's insane, if he has a split mind and cannot actually perceive reality correctly, he's always going to be self-deluded, isn't he? Which is exactly what we've been seeing from the other scriptures. Because Satan is a fallen angel who is an insane schizophrenic, he can never ever tell more than a half-truth, which, of course, is the most deceptive kind of lie. Because the truth sugarcoats the lie and leads people to believe it's all true. And Satan was, don't forget, the father of lies, starting in the Garden of Eden with Mother Eve. He killed her with a lie. Now that you know where all the false parts of these cosmologies are coming from, now you know why they're there. I'm going to try to deal with three of these. I'm on the first page of this thing, and it's taken me 30 minutes, and I don't hardly got more than much than 30 minutes left. Well, maybe I can cheat and go to 11:30. Maybe I can cheat and go to 11:45. which gives me nearly an hour, but I'm going to have to hump along. So if I start humping and bumping up here, just please forgive me. Let's look at these three false cosmologies now, define each one of them, and get rid of them. Let's look at that quasi-biblical flat earth. It uses Bible verses, but it interprets them fallaciously. To quote a Bible verse is good, but to then interpret the meaning of the words wrongly is bad. You want to interpret the meaning of the words correctly. If you're going to look at a graphy that was written down because of some rhema that Jesus spoke, you want to arrive at the correct logos, not a different logos. Logos meaning the definition or meaning, you see. Now, one of the things I'm going to tell you here is going to hurt some feelings. I'm sorry, it's the way things are. Beginning about early 1960s, culminating in the mid to late 60s, about 63 or 4, down to about 68, the federal government instigated a program among the states, and most of the states followed with them because of federal monies given to them in the education department. They took basic grammar and the 8 parts of speech and sentence diagramming out of the curriculums. And they also removed the parts on introductory logic. I was taught basic grammar and parts of speech from the 2nd and 3rd grade. I began to get the simple basics of sentence diagramming in about the 5th or 6th grade. When I got to junior high, they beat me to death with sentence diagramming. Then when I got in senior high, they put all of that stuff together and then hit me with introductory logic. Mr. John Smith was my 12th grade teacher. He spent half of our year in the 12th grade on introductory logic. And he said, this is the culmination of what all the grammar and word definitions are about. This is how you think. He used to teach that in school. All right, now, not homeschoolers, only public schoolers. Where now, ma'am, if you graduated from public school, from any form of public school after, say, 1968, everybody that had the 8 parts of speech and grammar in junior and high school, hold your hands up. About 40% of you. But what about 60% of you that didn't? You see, they're taking it out. Now look around again. Please hold your hands up one more time. Not all, but most of the people with their hands up are the older members. If you graduated high school after 1975, how many of you in middle school and high school studied the 8 parts of speech and grammar and sentence diagramming? Hold your hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Unless I missed somebody. See my point? They took it away from people. Now, homeschoolers, no matter what age you are, how many of you got it pounded into your head when you were a kid, 8 parts of speech? See, there you are. When I was in school, they taught it. But as I say, I graduated high school in 1959. In the next decade, they started taking this out of the schools. And this is one of the reasons why people have such difficulty understanding the King James Bible. The King James Bible is one of the finest productions of what's called modern English. Modern English, high-pointed. It came into existence between about 1400 to 1450. The writings of Chaucer, you might remember from high school literature, are considered to be the milestone of the formation of modern English. Modern English is held to have apexed, risen to its most powerful linguistic peak between about 1550 and 1650, and incorporates the works of Christopher Marlowe, Shakespeare, and that weird bunch of people known as the King James Translating Committee. Even atheists at Harvard have agreed that the King James Bible is probably the apex of the power of the English language. It's gone downhill since then. We adopted a lot of secondary meanings. We adopted tertiary meanings. We adopted sayings and proverbs, other languages mixed and mingled in. And now it's not that you can't do some really good thinking in English. You can. But half of English is dum-dum-doo-doo. You say, can you prove that? Yes. If you want an example of excellent English, go to some fine arts course at a fine university and sit down and take a course in Shakespeare and listen to how all that's explained. Then you want to contrast that with what English has devolved into. Go down and just sit around with any color of street people you want. White, yellow, brown, black, it doesn't matter. Just find some street folk and talk to him. Dumb say, like this, like that. He say, he done this. They don't know how to talk. They're illiterate. That's the point. That was intended by the government when they did this back in the 60s. Why? To make people dependent on public media, public speeches, to guide them into gradually voting in commie left-wing liberalism until they could get rid of every trace of constitutional republicanism in this country and lead us into a new world order. That's what it was done for. And so I say, to summarize this up, because I'm using valuable time, most people today, even if they have doctor's degrees in university, are semi-literate when it comes to the use of the English language correctly. I can't tell you how many PhDs I've tried to debate theology with that sometimes don't even understand basic grammar. Now, if you go to school and you take grammar in college, and you take maybe at least one elective or so in advanced composition, you could recover most of that stuff was taken away from you. But you'd be surprised how many masters and PhDs, especially in technical fields, don't bother with that because they say, well, it ain't technical, so it ain't going to do me no good. So they can sit down and draw engineering diagrams, but they can't tell anybody what they mean. You see the problem? Semi-literate. So one of the things we're going to run into, particularly when we deal with this quasi-biblical flat earth, is semi-literacy. Now, let me get back to it. It uses Bible verses but interprets them fallaciously. Here it is, simple definition you'll find on. This stuff started coming out in a few dozen places in 2013 on the internet. Here we are, 6 years later, there are over 3 million places that discuss flat earth. And I've watched hundreds of these things because whenever I'm going to sit out and put myself in opposition to something, I want to understand it. My speech instructor in high school taught me what you want to do is zero in on the best arguments the enemy has and learn how to refute them. If you can refute the best, you can laugh at the rest. And this is true. So, here's the definition. The earth is a huge flat circle resting upon pillars protruding downward into the void. The South Pole is really a very high ice wall completely encircling the flat earth to keep the water from spilling off. And the atmosphere above is actually enclosed in a glass-like firmament shaped like an upside-down bowl, with the sun, the moon, and the stars moving around in circles inside of the glass bowl, with heaven and God located directly above the bowl-like firmament. In other words, they will even deny that there's interstellar space out there running for hundreds and thousands of light years. All of its little compacted, tiny little filaments like Christmas tree lights burning inside of a glass bulb turned upside down. And that's the firmament. Now, I'm not going to comment now. I'll comment later. but I'm just going to get into it right now. This fallacy is based upon hyperliteralism, which mostly literalizes a great many biblical metaphors and allegories and figures of speech, and turns a few literal statements into metaphors, allegories, and figures of speech instead of taking them literally like they should have been. Because Satan loves to make the Bible and Bible believers look stupid. And you'll find that almost all flat earthers are King James people. And I'm going to tell you that's good and that's bad. The good thing is that there are some King James people. The bad thing is, because of the reasons I've explained to you, we're going into the third generation of semi-literate King James Bible believers. It's been 50 years since the 60s. We are now, the third generation is in middle and high school right now, without being taught grammar, without being taught sentence diagramming, without being taught basic logic. And so they fumble and fobble around. They don't even know how to use a dictionary sometimes. So they'll fumble around there. What do you think? What do I think? And then they'll vote on what a word means, and we believe it means this. That doesn't mean doodly squat. That doesn't mean doodly squat. So, it's to make the Bible believers look stupid, and it's enabled because the government has made them half stupid by turning them into semi-literate. As I said, a condition which many masters and PhDs in technical fields never, ever remedy. Now, let's talk about this fallacy in more detail. The Bible is written in what may be called anthropocentric style. Anthropos, man. Centric, centered. Man-centered in the sense of human beings, not woman-centered. But anthropos is a generic term that includes men and women in the Greek. So anthropocentric means the Bible is written from the standpoint of a person standing here on the earth looking out yonder. That's anthropocentric style. Now, as long as such a description is accurate from that viewpoint, as long as the description is accurate from that viewpoint, it's perfectly true. Because what is truth? An accurate representation of reality. What is reality? The way things actually are. So what is truth? An accurate representation of the way things actually are. See? Simple. From that viewpoint. Now, you won't, walk out to the moon and start looking at things. It's going to look a lot different. Some of the stars are going to be right where you thought they'd be, but there'll be other things moving around out there that, whoa, you say, this is exactly the opposite of what I saw yesterday down on Earth. Walk out to the sun. Now take a look at it. Whoa, more changes, even different from the moon or the Earth. See, it depends on the viewpoint. So what we have to go for is accuracy of operation. When we're reading Bible verses, it doesn't matter if God in His infinite wisdom chose to give us the truth in a figure of speech. Just take it as a figure of speech because it's true from that viewpoint. You go trying to change it into something you don't know, and the best word I can think of to describe where you're going then is screwball. Now, if the same astronomical events were viewed from a different viewpoint, as I said, say heliocentricity from the sun's position, they might look quite different to the eyeballs, but the mathematical relationships would remain exactly the same. Gravity, speed, relative, and all that stuff. In physics, they call this a coordinate system. A system of things, objects, and processes that are all coordinated. They're related to one another so that you can derive the systemic relationships by careful study. Probably more of the women in here know what I'm getting at than the men. Us men tend to solve problems because testosterone makes you do this. Testosterone makes you solve problems. Notice, sometimes women don't solve problems as well as men do. But let me tell you what women do better 9 times out of 10 than most men. They resolve situations. You find a bunch of people trying to get along, and I guarantee you women will figure out how to calm things down quicker than the average man. The man looks at it and says, you differ with me, that's a problem. I'm going to solve you, buddy. Now, the woman looks at it and she says, wait a minute. We're all saying half of the same thing. Let's look at the difference of opinion and see why we differ and why we're alike. And after about 15 minutes of Mama's explanations, well, yeah, she's right, you know. Women resolve situations. So you've always got to remember these little differences. So in physics, this is coordinate systems. Systems of objects whose relationships look different, but are actually the same. Now, here's some fancy words we're not going to explain. I'll just say them. Some of you will know what they are. If you don't, just go with the flow. The mathematics of Fourier and Laplace transforms and Einstein's theories of relativity have established that such relationships of coordinate systems may be taken once confirmed as a scientific given. You've got to observe, you've got to measure, you've got to repeat to make sure you got it right, but that's the scientific method given to us in about the 1200s by, was it Roger Bacon? So we find then that this is where we really began making progress in civilization, is when we discovered this scientific method. Now, if you follow that, you will find that no matter which place in the universe you're looking at things from, even though they look different, the mathematics are going to work out to be the same. They will all affect each other identically the same no matter where you are, because as Einstein explained, all motion is relative. Once that was understood, it opened the golden doors a mile wide to scientific progress. Now, using this information, let's refute the flat earth by noting certain Bible verses and physical facts that cannot be explained away. That's how we're going to do it. We're going to show the flat earthers there's some things they cannot gainsay, and those things are sufficient to beat the flat earth dead in the head like hitting a white rat with a baseball bat. Now, we're going to cover 4 essential points without which even one of these flat earth cannot survive. There are 4, but now flat earth believes a lot more than this. We don't have time. But these, in my estimation, are 4 of the most essential beliefs of the flat earth doctrine. Flat earth cannot survive the loss of even one of them. Even one of them, it's game over. And we've got 4. And when we finish, I'm going to show where you can go and get about 20 more. But we'll get there in due time. We're only going to deal with 4. Now, point 1. Flat earthers believe the earth is precisely flat. There is no curvature. It's like this piece of paper laid here on the table. Flat. All right, now, can we refute that? Yep. Refutation number 1, visible laser light. An experiment was done down in New Orleans. How many of you know about the Lake Pontchartrain Bridge in New Orleans? Oh, come on now. All right, one high so I can see. There's about 4 or 5. I've been back and forth over that thing a dozen times or more. It's about a 29.5 mile long bridge across Lake Pontchartrain from Maine, Louisiana, into New Orleans from the north side. So you're driving over this big lake. Now, as you drive over that lake, you can stand there at the beginning, whether you're in New Orleans looking up, whether you're in Louisiana looking down. It doesn't matter. Either end of Lake Pontchartrain, when you stand there and look at it, what you see is this long bridge going over the horizon and disappearing in the distance. When you get on it and drive, let's say you're driving into New Orleans, all of a sudden you see the tops of buildings rising on the horizon. Then the midpoints of the buildings are there. And then as you come down the end of the road, the last couple of miles on the other side, the whole city's sitting there on the shore. What are you looking at there? We're going to talk about that. An experiment was done using a tight red laser light. A tight laser means one focus, so it stays in a single beam. The red doesn't make any difference. You could have done it with green, yellow, brown, blue, and polka dotted, as far as I know. But they used a red laser light, and it was fastened in parallel to the top of Lake Pontchartrain, I think on the New Orleans, on the Louisiana side, looking toward New Orleans. And here you think of the tabletop as the bridge. It's level. You see how it's built level at any one spot. Then you come in and you put up an apparatus that holds a laser beam, and you adjust the apparatus so the laser beam is exactly parallel with the bridge top. And you measure it out here and make sure it's exactly parallel. Now, they flipped that light on and looked, and what did they see? The result is the bridge, of course, continued dropping out of sight in the distance. The red laser light continued to shine horizontally at an ever-increasing distance above the bridge. This proves visibly and irrefutably that the Earth's surface is curved. Fallacy refuted. We could go home now and watch Clint Eastwood on TV, and we put an end to the flat Earth. That's it. It's just that simple. But you take basic grammar, 8 parts of speech, sentence diagramming, introductory logic away from them, and then raise them on street, blah, 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 and you see what you get. They don't even have the common sense, at least 4 times out of 5, of picking up a dictionary and looking at a definition. All right, refutation number 2. Surveying very large triangles. I first learned about this in reading about George Washington. He was a surveyor when he was a young man before he got into politics. He was a surveying technician. He surveyed all over Virginia and other parts of the country and all that. Made a nice bit of money doing that in his day. Those of us that have taken basic trigonometry, and you get a little bit of that in school, if you don't like it, they hit you in the head and make you take it anyway. Basic trigonometry teaches us that the sum of all the angles of a triangle is 180 degrees. You know, a triangle, tri meaning 3, it's one of these 3-sided things with 3 angles in it. And no matter how it's shaped, if you add up all those angles, it equals 180 degrees. But now here's something that's fascinating. Let's say you're going to go out in the field and survey. Let's say, there's some farm property that the family gives up or loses for some reason, and the folks living round about get permission from the state to form a township. So they're going to go out there and survey the township to find out where to put the buildings, where to put the roads, so they don't violate anybody's property rights and so forth. One of the things you do is you'll get out there on some of those sightings with your little survey scope, you know, and your little dialer down here where they measure the angles. And they'll be looking at a side of a triangle, say, that may be a mile long. It may be 5,000, 6,000 feet. So they're sighting down there, writing down the exact angle. Then they sight over here at another point way out there, say 3,500 feet. And they send a guy out to put a stop down there, and they sight on that and get it just so. Then to make sure they're right, they go either to that one yonder or this one here, and they sight at the other one. And they measure that very carefully. And guess what? Without exception, when you're measuring large triangles, the sum of the angles is greater than 180 degrees. greater than 180 degrees. Give you a simple example. Let's say that we're on the equator and we measure all the way to the North Pole and put up a stop so we can see it through the telescope, so to speak. Now we've got this, 24,000 mile circumference of the Earth, so we've got 6,000 miles to the North Pole. We put up that stop, we got that angle. We tell them up there, say, angle over at 90 degrees. I'm going to walk around. You wave when I get there. So you start walking around the equator another 6,000 miles, and you keep your eye on the guy at the North Pole who's measuring 90 degrees, and he gets up there. There you are. He waves at you. You stop, put a stop down. Now you start measuring the angles of that three-angle triangle. You know what they're going to come up to? 270 degrees, because you will have three 90-degree angles. This is impossible on a flat surface, but is the only thing possible on a curved surface. And so the conclusion we reach is the Earth is not flat. It is the curved surface of a large sphere. Fallacy refuted. See, you can refute the flat Earth with spherical trigonometry, or you can refute it with tight red laser light. Either one of these puts an end to any question about whether or not there's a curvature on the Earth's surface. End of that point. It just died. We've just killed flat Earth. We could go home and have fun, but you're going to have to suffer through me for a while longer because I got a little more time. I'll try to make it not so bad for you. Let's get down to point 2. Forget the curve. We've proven the Earth is curved. That's over. It's not a flat Earth. So the main argument is settled and nothing else really matters. It ain't flat. It's curved, surface of a sphere. Now let's look at the second point that they love, the firmament. This is the one when you listen to a flat Earth preacher, and I've listened to several of them, they will go for an hour to an hour and a half reading every firmament verse in the Bible. You just sit there, you dozing through the sermon because you've heard them so many times. Firmament, 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 firmament. And you're just doing this. I'm going to try to keep this as simple as I possibly can. We're going to use a couple of 3 verses and put an end to it. But remember, what's the fallacy? The fallacy is hyperliteralizing figures of speech into literal statements, or literal statements into figures of speech. Because if you take an accurate figure of speech and take it literally, it's wrong. If you take a true literal statement and allegorize it, it's now wrong. And this is what they do with all of the firmament verses in the Bible. Now let me show you how it works. Let's go to Genesis 1, 6 through 8 to get the starting point God gave us. What is the firmament? That's what we're going to study. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. Stop right there. They've got all we need. If we get us a lexicon out and look up that Hebrew word, we find out in Strong's Hebrew lexicon, number 7459, that the word for firmament is rakia. Rakia. In English, you spell that R-A-Q-I-Y-A. Rakia. All right, what's a rakia? Well, let's look it up in a lexicon. Now get this. Properly, an expanse. That is the firmament or apparently visible arch of the sky. Notice the Hebrew word firmament describes it as an expanse. If we look at the English word firmament, the heavens or the sky, especially when regarded as a tangible thing. You ever gotten blown over in a windstorm? That's tangible, you see. All right, now, the heavens or the sky. It means exactly the same thing as the Hebrew. Where does the English word come from? It comes from the Latin, which means firmus. Do you know what firmus means in Latin? Have you actually looked in a dictionary, looked up there in those little paragraph things where it tells you the etymology, where the word came from, like they used to teach in college, in high school, and they stopped teaching way back there 50 years ago? You find out that firmus means, are you ready for this? Hold on tight. It's going to be utterly shocking. Firmus in Latin means an expanse or a stretched out space, exactly as the English word, exactly as the Hebrew word. So these words are perfectly translating each other. A stretched out expanse. The Hebrew intends it to mean the sky, the English intends it to mean the sky, and the Latin intends it to mean the sky. That's what it means. But now, what do the flat earthers tell us? The flat earthers tell us that firmament means firm. It means solid. It means hard. Firm means firm. I'm not kidding you. You look at these dodo birds. I've got a book by a guy named Hendry, highly educated, master's degree, Department of Justice, Washington, D.C. Got a lot of good stuff in his books, a lot of good stuff. I'm not knocking his good stuff. It's the dum-dum doo-doo I don't like. And one of his dum-dum doo-doos is firm means firm. My daddy was a lawyer. My daddy taught me how to use dictionaries. I was using dictionaries before the school taught me how to do it. There's no excuse for this man because he uses legal dictionaries to look up legal terms. It apparently never dawned on the knucklehead to use a Bible dictionary to look up Bible terms. But firmament does not mean firm, but they say it does, and it doesn't. Hyper-literalizing, you see? Changing a figure of speech into a literal statement. Bad, bad, bad. The flat earthers will say it means something firm. It doesn't. As I've shown you, the Bible, Hebrew, English words, and even Latin words means the open air. And the way God constructed Genesis 1, and he called the firmament heaven. They'll go to Job 37:18. Every one of them goes to this verse. This is the only verse the flat earthers have that I've yet heard that they say proves the firmament is solid, like a glass bowl. Turn over to Job 37:18. Job 37:18. Hast thou with him spread out the sky? We're talking about the sky. What's firmament mean in Hebrew? The sky. What's firmament mean in English? The sky. What's firmament mean in Latin? The sky. He spreadeth out the sky, which is strong, and as a molten looking glass. They'll jump on that and say, see, it's actually like a molten looking glass, actually like the solid glass of a mirror. There's a glass bowl up there turned upside down, and that's what the firmament is, a giant upside down glass bowl. I kid you not, they argue that, some with master's degrees. But dumb, stupid. I'm sorry. I'm trying to be, every time I try to be sweet, Jesus and Nehemiah get in my way. Now, they use this text to prove the firmament is a solid glass. They overlook the little adverb as a molten looking glass. You see how as, you see that? It's an adverb. In the Hebrew, it's a single letter attached to the front end of the word. That's how in Hebrew they do these type of adverbs. It's a single letter scotch taped onto the front end of the word. But it works just like it does in English. It's a simile. It's a metaphor. It's kind of sort of like. It doesn't mean it is. As does not mean is. The text does not say the sky's glass. It says the sky looks like glass. This is a perfect example of hyperliteralism, changing a metaphor into something literal and making a true statement from God sound stupid. And I think that's why they do it. I'm not accusing the flat earthers of doing it purposefully. That's why the government did it in school, so the flat earthers wouldn't know how to do it right and then wind up with something that's idiotic because they won't self-teach themselves basic grammar. They'll take the lazy way out and say, well, I done gone through school, I done been taught, I done know this stuff, all the way up to a doctor's degree in some cases. Now let's kill this stupid fallacy in the head with a club. Now go back to Genesis 1. I'll wait till you turn there. Please forgive me. This is horrible stuff. I really am sorry to sit up here in front of everybody doing this, but if I don't do it, you'll be a lot more sorry. Trust me. You do not want to see me with a wet green mustache, all right? All right. So, Genesis 1:20. Don't look at me, look at the words on the page. What you're looking at up here is the result of the Garden of Eden, but that's the result of inspiration. So you look at the page. Genesis 1:20. Now look at it carefully. And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth. Watch it now. In the open firmament of heaven. Where do the birds fly? In the open firmament of heaven. They actually fly up there inside of the upside down glass bowl. They're flying around inside of solid glass in the solid glass firmament of heaven. How many times you sat in your living room and watched a sparrow slam into your picture window and fall unconscious on the ground? How many times you been driving down the highway and all of a sudden, blam, some poor old bird hits your windshield, guts, blood, and feathers spattered and pieces of bird flying everywhere. You nearly run off the road, not seeing it coming. Why didn't they just fly on through and go mind their business? I'll tell you why. Fallacy refuted. The firmament is not an upside-down glass bowl. That is one word, technical term, dum-dum-doo-doo. Now, let's look at point 3, the movement of the sun each day through the sky. Now, remember, in the upside-down glass bowl theory, the sun's moving around in a tiny circle, and it's much, much smaller than folks think it is, and it's up there just a few miles over your head moving around in a solid glass bowl, along with the stars and the moon and all this. You said they actually teach that? Oh, yeah, they do. Yes, they do. I wouldn't be sitting here talking about it if they didn't. And you can find about 3 million places on the internet where they'll say it themselves. Now, let's look at 4 important. Let's just forget sky, firmament, glass bowls, and everything else. And let's look at 4 important facts about sun movement. 1, a circle has 360 degrees, period. B, a solar day, that is day and night, has 24 hours. 24 hours. 360 degrees divided by 24 hours equals 15 degrees per hour. You can do the arithmetic. I mean, you get a kid in here that's had 4th grade math. They can easily do the arithmetic. Simple division. Now, the 4th fact, the sun moves 15 degrees per hour everywhere on Earth. If you want to go down to the South Atlantic Ocean, get you a boat and run up against that real high ice wall they tell us runs around all the flat Earth. You stand there with your back against that ice wall and watch the sun. Whoa! You can take a compass and measure, along with your watch, and every hour, 15 degrees. Now run up to the North Pole. The North Pole is that little bitty spot of ice up in the center of the flat Earth map. And you stand there, you take your watch, and you take your compass, and you watch the sun move through the sky. What do you see? It moves 15 degrees every hour. Now, pick any other place on the entire flat Earth you want to go. Pick 5 places. Pick 105 places. If you had several lifetimes, you could go to every single square foot of land, stand there and do the same measurements. Everywhere on Earth, you look at the sun move through the sky, it moves 15 degrees every hour. Period. No exceptions. Anywhere. Now, those are the 4 basic facts we're going to deal with. Now, the flat Earth model and map with its sun in an upside-down glass bowl cannot predict 15-degree sun movement for every spot on its map. It'll be 1 or 2 degrees at the least, and it can be as much as 100 or more degrees at the largest. And everywhere you go on Earth, if it's a different latitude from the center, is going to be a different degree movement by mathematics. If you just simply calculate in your head. But you look up in the sky with a watch and a compass, and it's actually moving 15 degrees every hour. Now, this is exactly the way the sun would move on a spherical Earth, and it cannot move that way everywhere on a flat Earth. Fallacy refuted. Gone. Done. See, each of these 3 fallacies we've refuted so far, flat Earth cannot survive one of them. And it's lost 3 already. It's not only wrong, it's 3 times wrong. Now we got the 4th argument, the circle of the earth. This is one of their most beloved ones. Turn to Isaiah 40, verse 22. Isaiah 40, verse 22. It is He, God, verse 18, it identifies God. It is He that sitteth upon the circle of the earth. The flat earthers will say that means a flat map and God sitting there, got his throne room sitting down on a flat floor. He says the earth is his footstool. He says we don't have spherical footstools. All the footstools are flat, so he's got his foot on a flat earth. They will. Don't take my word for it. Spend the rest of the afternoon looking it up on the internet. That's what they argue. Now, let's see the best way to attack this one. Both the Hebrew and English word means circle. Therefore, flat earthers claim this is a proof text that the earth is a flat circle with that glass bowl firmament on top. Fact. Throughout all the months of the year, the earth so moves so as to cast its shadow on the moon. That's why you have different phases of the moon all through the month, remember? New moon, full moon, quarter moon, half moon. Now here's the interesting thing. The shadow may be cast on a small edge of the moon, or over most of the moon, or in the case of a total eclipse, over all of the moon. But in all cases, that shadow of the earth is a circle. Now, in the flat earth model, in almost every imaginable case, this would be impossible. It's just geometrically not possible. The only geometric shape that casts a circular shadow from every possible direction without exception is a sphere. The phrase circle of the earth is a metaphor for what we call the great circle of a sphere. Let's do something easy. Let's take a basketball. That's a sphere. Hold it out at arm's length. At that distance, if you just kind of sort of look at it and don't examine it, it looks like a brown, round circle, doesn't it? What's that outer perimeter? That outer perimeter, in fact, is the largest possible circumference of a spherical object viewed from any given viewpoint. You know what they call that in topography? I know because I was a topographic draftsman with a top secret security clearance in the Marine Corps. I used to draw maps, not only for the Alabama State Highway Department, but for the United States Marine Corps. I'd get satellite photos. Well, that day we had flying U-2 photos and stuff. But I have composed maps from plane photos of the Earth several miles up in the sky. And I could composite them, put them together, draw it out, put it on a flat sketch map. And they'd use that in the colonel's briefing or whatever. I know what I'm talking about. I did this for a job. I was trained in it, had a top secret security clearance in it. What you're dealing with is the great circle of a sphere. That's what it's called in topography. The great circle, from any point that you view a sphere, here, squatting, there, standing on a tabletop, around the room over yonder, just standing on 2 feet like this, it doesn't matter what direction you look at a sphere from. That outermost perimeter, the largest possible line that can be drawn on the surface of a sphere from any given viewpoint is the great circle. What we've got here, the phrase circle of the earth, is a metaphor for the great circle of a spherical earth. It's not talking about a flat circle on a tabletop. It's talking about the great circle of a sphere. The earth is a sphere. The flat earthers hyperliteralized the metaphor. Fallacy refuted. Now, we've taken 4 fallacies, some of them based on their most favorite verses, the firmament verses, the molten glass verse, the circle of the earth verse. And we've proven in all cases that we're dealing with aspects of a spherical surface. Any one of these 4 arguments that I've refuted kills the flat earth dead in the water. We don't even need the other 3. But I've given you 4. We've killed it dead and jumped up and down in the corpse 3 more times. Now, if you like seeing dead bodies beat around with ball bats, let me tell you a place to go on the internet that's fascinating. I found out from this by watching one of my favorite science lecturers, Dr. Kent Hovind. I met him personally. My friend, Dr. Stuart Crane, who helped start this church, Stuart Crane was a friend of Kent Hovind's. He knew him very well. And they used to talk together. When I had a chance to meet Kent Hovind, I went up and introduced myself as the man that had baptized Stuart Crane. You know what Kent Hovind said? "You're the guy." Anyway, I was listening to Dr. Kent Hovind deal with these fallacies of the flat earth, and he started laughing. He said, "Let me give you a fun place to go to get this." He said, "You want to go on YouTube to see this young Englishman. He's got a video lasts about 38 minutes. He said it is informative, irrefutable, and hilarious. Here's the name of it. I'll repeat it. It's 5 words. I'll repeat it 2 or 3 times. So for those of you that are scribbling and want to watch it this afternoon. Flat earth, ultimate, debunking, obliteration. All right? Flat earth, ultimate, debunking, obliteration. One more time. Flat earth, ultimate, debunking, obliteration. What he does, it takes about 38 minutes and gives you 20 arguments, just like the 4 I gave you. In fact, he uses a couple of these that I do. Then he has about 18 others I did not use. So you'll get a total with me and him of 22 irrefutable arguments, any one of which will kill the flat earth dead. Then you can sit back and enjoy watching idiots beat with a stick. It really is. It's quite pleasurable. So we'll leave it right there. Old Ken Hovind was laughing when he talked about this place, and after I saw it, that's why I'm laughing telling you about it. You go watch it, you'll laugh all the way through it, I promise you. Okay. There is no flat earth. End of flat earth. End of flat earth, remember, is based on the fallacy of hyperliteralism, based itself on the fact that most people today are semi-literate because the government in public schools has taken away basic grammar, 8 parts of speech, sentence diagramming, and introductory logic. Those of you that are educated in private schools, for the most part, not all, but some, and those of you who are homeschooled, particularly Christian homeschooling, have probably had all of these things, and, you're sitting there saying, they don't teach people this stuff in school? No, they do not. Aren't you glad you didn't go to school? Isn't it a blessing to be ignorant? All right, so now let's look at these other 2. I'm going to give you the gist of this one because it's very important. Then we'll topwater the other one a little bit. Theistic geocentricity is the fact that the earth is sitting solid. It does not revolve on its axis. It just sits still, and everything, sun, moon, and stars, moves around it. Yes, there are very educated people who believe that. This is a return to the Roman Catholic Church's position when they sanctioned Galileo back in the 1600s for teaching that the earth moved around the sun. This fallacy argues that the earth is the center of the universe and that the sun, moon, planets, and stars all orbit around the earth. Posing as a Bible doctrine, it is a heinous perpetuation of a system of ancient pagan beliefs. Now, I've got a nice Bible passage here, but I haven't got the time to get into it now. I'll give it to you, though. It's Revelation 17, 1 through 6. Revelation 17, 1 through 6. This is the one where the mother of harlots, Babylon the Great, is riding on the beast. The woman riding on the beast. And that is, of course, the Roman religious system. This is making it very short. I could prove it if I had time, but I've got to make it very short. Rome adopted the system from Babylon. They were motivated that way when the descendants of Alexander the Great came over and tried to conquer Rome. And then Rome went over there and conquered them, and then Rome introduced itself to the Babylonians, and they got all of the ancient doctrines, and they went home and adjusted their religious system and so forth. So this is at the Tower of Babel, they were teaching geocentricity. You'll just let it go at that. When you look up Revelation 17, 1 through 6, you'll see this. Now, the important thing here is that the Roman Catholic Church under Constantine the Great was modified as a form of the Babylonian mystery religion held by Rome at the time. So Peter did not found the Roman Catholic Church, and he played no part in the foundation of the Roman Catholic Church. It was a conversion of the Babylonian system of his day. What I'm going to use valuable time proving to you is Peter was not part of the Roman Catholic Church. He was not the first pope, and the Roman Catholic Church was not founded on him as the first pope. Let me prove that. Let's look at the church that Jesus founded. Jesus was baptized by a man, he himself 4 times denominated. Denominate means to officially name. Jesus 4 times denominated the guy John the Baptist. When a Baptist preacher baptizes someone, they do not come out of the water a Methopiscoparian, wait a minute, a Methopiscoparian athlete Campbellite Ormond. They come out of Baptist, as Jesus did. For instance, Emma, where are you sitting, honey? Wave at me so I can see. There you are. When you got out of the water downstairs that day, were you a Methopiscoparian athlete Catholic Ormond? Did it turn out you were maybe a Baptist? Well, there you go. She's been there and done that. I mean, child's telling you the truth. You know what Jesus said? A little child shall lead them. So she's going to lead us right into correct theology here. Thank you very much, Emma. I appreciate that. Jesus Christ, therefore, was a Baptist. Why? He was baptized by a Baptist preacher that he called a Baptist preacher. John didn't call himself the Baptist. He just came baptizing. Jesus named him the Baptist. It's because of Jesus calling him John the Baptist, everybody else started calling him the Baptist. Well, if he was a Baptist, then what was Jesus when he came out of the water? A Baptist. You see, the word Baptist is defined in 2 ways. A Baptist can either be a baptizer that dips people, or it can be a baptizee that got dipped. Either way, that's what a Baptist is. There's 2 ways of defining the term. The word Baptist in the Greek, baptisma, comes from the root word baptisma, which means to dip, plunge, or immerse. Then you got baptismo, then you got baptizine, and 2 or 3 other forms of the word, 2 or 3 other cognates. They all mean to dip, plunge, or immerse. Now, Jesus Christ founded a church which had to be a Baptist church, because that's what he was. And the church was founded in Matthew 16. Such churches have 2 ordinances. Baptism that you can read about in John 4, and communion that you can read about like we're going to do next. We're going to wind up with communion. Well, let me give you these quick verses here. Matthew 16, 15 through 18. He saith unto them, But whom say ye that I am? And Simon Peter answered and said, Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered and said unto him, Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee. Whoa! Peter didn't make that up. Peter didn't dream that up. Peter was not a creative, imaginative, novelistic theologian. Where did the idea come from? Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. And I say also unto thee, now watch it closely, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Now let's analyze 2 words. Thou art Peter. That word in the Greek is Petros. It's masculine gender, and it means a small pebble. Thou art Peter, and upon this rock, see, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I'll build my church. That rock is Petra. Different word. Petra. It's feminine. Feminine, not masculine. And it means a large, massive shelf of rock. Do you see the difference between a large, massive shelf of rock and a pebble the size of a marble? You see the difference? Do you see the difference between a man and a woman? A lot of people can't tell that difference. But first thing you do is you check your DNA. Then you look in your britches and see if it's there. Wow, double confirmation. It's just as simple as it can be. So if you're going to start talking about, it's really a bisexual named transgender. Well, it is? Okay, then you tell me. How can a large, massive shelf of rock possibly be a small pebble and vice versa? It can't. Therefore, DNA ain't the same. Boys ain't girls, and transgenderism is damnable heresy and perversion. Which, just like the Bible says, it's against nature. Nature being DNA. So, bingo. Now watch what this teaches us. Thou art the little pebble, masculine Petros. I'm going to build my church on the giant shelf of rock named Petra, feminine. They are not the same. They are exact opposites. They're as opposite as a man from a woman is opposite as a pebble from a hilltop. Petros, Petra. And Jesus says, on this rock, Petra, I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Therefore, that in the words of Christ we have just proven, he did not build his church on Peter. Therefore, any church claiming to be built on Peter is a damnable lie. Now let's look at some more Bible verses real quickly. Look at John 4, 1 and 2. John 4, 1 and 2. Now, when therefore the Lord knew how the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself baptized not but his disciples. But you see, here's where baptism is put in. Jesus went out and told his disciples, I authorize you, go dip that person in water like John's doing over yonder. So that's where the other baptisms came from. So here we have the first ordinance of the church, the new church, immersion. Now, in Matthew, don't turn to it, in Matthew 26, 26 through 29, Mark 14, 22 through 25, Luke 22, 17 through 20, and 1 Corinthians 11, 23 through 26. You have Jesus eating the last Passover and then converting it into a communion observance for his church. So the Passover is converted by Jesus Christ personally into communion. And that's the second ordinance of the church. So here Jesus starts his church, says it wasn't built on Peter, and he gives us the two ordinances of the church, baptism and communion. There's your complete New Testament church. That's it, nutshell. See that? Now, let's summarize this stuff about the Roman Catholic geocentricity. The New Testament church was fully functional 292 years before 325 AD, when the pagan Emperor Constantine proclaimed the religious system, the whore we read about riding on the beast in Revelation 17, to be the Roman Catholic Church. And two, Peter was not any kind of pope. For instance, Julius Caesar, over 60 years before Christ, actually held the position of pope in the Roman religious system. His official title was Papus, Father or Pope. He also held the title of Pontifex Maximus, which was the chief big guy, right? Pontifex Maximus. He held the position of Vicarius Dei, which is Latin for the voice of the gods. It has later been modified to apply to the Pope as Vicarius Deus, the voice of God. See, here all of these titles held by Julius Caesar 60 years before there was any kind of a pope, any kind of church by Jesus Christ. Since Constantine made the church in 325 AD, you've got 385 years before the Roman Catholic Church came into existence. All of these titles were being used by Julius Caesar when he held the position as head of the church in the Roman system. And where did the Romans get the Roman system? Just like God said in that verse we read, the whore that rides on the beast. Babylon the Great, mystery of harlots and abominations of the earth. mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. So the Roman Catholic Church is not the church that Jesus founded. It's a deviant reformation of the pagan Roman religious system based on Babylonian mystery religion. The whore riding on a beast, Satan's counterfeit of the Church of Christ. Its doctrine of theistic geocentricity is therefore a lie, because Satan is an insane schizophrenic and cannot tell the truth. Also, we've got more information that follows. Unfortunately, it just turned 11:59, and I got about 15 more fascinating minutes on stuff. Make that 20 minutes. I'm just going to have to stop here. Atheistic heliocentricity. Well, let's just say it this way. I'll give it to you as brief as I can. If it's atheistic version, we can toss it. They talk about the Big Bang and a big balloon skin blowing up like this and all the stars located in the balloon skin with everything inside the balloon and outside the balloon just an empty vacuum. That's false. It's not that way. That's a mathematical fable. What they did is they sent up three, and I'd love to give you the facts on each of these three. It's mind-boggling. But they sent up 3 space probes in a row from about 1900 up into 2013, and they were trying to explain why in the background radiation they thought was left over from the Big Bang, you had some regularly dispersed cold spots over here, colder than average, and regularly dispersed hotter than average warm spots over here. Because if it was a Big Bang, you couldn't have it regulation. It would have to be all the same temperature. And it's not. So they sent up 3 different probes to try to confirm that this was a misunderstanding. Each probe, better and better, more and more strength and more powerful, proved it was that way. You know what they finally decided at the end? They call it the axis of evil. Because they found out if you take these areas of hotter and colder than average background radiation and plot them out inside of a volumetric sphere, that one of these planes passes through what we would call the equatorial plane of the universe, and thus through the dead center of the universe. The other one forms a plane at 23.4 degrees angle off of the other one, and it also passes through the center of the universe. And where they intersect forms a straight line axis that passes from the equatorial outside of the spherical universe through the exact center on through to the equatorial outside on the other. And that straight line is called the axis of evil. Now, I'm going to let you guess this. If you go to the exact center of that axis, what's there in a spherical universe? The solar system. And you find out that one of those planes goes through the horizontal plane upon which all the satellites of the sun orbit, all the planets orbit in this plane around the sun. And this one of these planes that we talked about goes right through that center. The other one comes in at 23.4 degree angles, intersecting, and thus forming an X marks the spot. If you look at it from the side, it forms an X marks the spot. And guess what? The tilt of the Earth on its axis is 23.4 degrees, which means as it moves around the sun, is tilted at that 23.4 degrees, which means that that other plane is intersecting the Earth perpendicular to its tilt exactly of axis. And thus you have the sun-moon system aligned. And I'm going to close my sermon by putting it this way. This refutes the balloon skin theory of the scientists. It's not a balloon skin. It's a volume of stars. It's spherical shaped. And when you map out these 2 planes I described, they point to the exact center of the universe, which is the solar system, and there's not another star or known object within 4.5 light years in any direction. We sit in a 9 light year diameter empty space at the center of the universe. And then you have the sun and the moon revolving, the earth and the moon revolving around each other. And this is another coordinate system. Because as Isaac Newton pointed out, and has been confirmed in every century since, when two objects orbit each other like that, they're actually, you can imagine them connected with a string of gravity. And that somewhere on that line, there is a balance point, a center of gravity. The center of gravity, and actually both objects are orbiting around that center of gravity. The sun contains something like 98, 99% of the mass of the universe, of the solar system. The planets have about 98 or 99% of the angular velocity. This proving they couldn't have evolved from each other. Because if the planets evolved from the sun, they would match the almost lack of orbital movement. And they would share a lot more mass. So therefore, when you look at the orbiting Earth around the sun and connect it with that line of gravity, there is a center of mass. And it just so happens, because the sun is so huge and the Earth is so tiny, even at a distance, that the center of mass is located just 100 miles or two inside the surface of the sun. Which means that that center of mass that connects on a line of gravity, the sun and the Earth, is turning around that center axis. The sun's mass itself, the center of the sun, is orbiting around that center of mass point, just like the Earth is orbiting around it. Every year, over and over and over. And that's the center of the system. Why? To emphasize it's a system. The sun is the source of life. If you had the planet Earth with no sun, it'd be a dead rock. If you had the sun with no Earth, it'd be just another light shining in the night sky. But the two together locates the place of life where God is going to send that seed of the woman to redeem his chosen people in due time. He came, and when he came, just like the story in the stars tell us, he had to do battle with a great dragon in order to deliver his bride. The dragon bruised his heel. He bruised the dragon's head. He will go away and leave for a long time and then come one last time to destroy the dragon and to gather his bride and take her home to heaven. And I believe, therefore, that the true biblical cosmology is biblical heliocentricity. It's the system itself, and that the center of the entire universe is at or very near the center of mass of the orbiting sun-moon system. And God designed it that way to point his fingers and form an X to locate it, to show that this is where it would all happen. And that, my friends, I believe is the doctrine of biblical cosmology. I'll leave you with this thought. Romans 11:33, you don't have to turn. Oh, the depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments, and his ways past finding out. And thank you, Brother Mike, but I know I got that right. Thank you for your kind attention. God bless you.